As martial arts were in their nascent stages, monstrous and exotic beasts threatened the very existence of human warriors, forcing them to surrender and retreat. But then, Lucian's consciousness traversed time and space, transporting him 10,000 years ahead in a dream world, where the most rudimentary of physical training techniques had evolved into a highly advanced form, thousands of times more effective than before. In this distant future, Lucian discovered martial arts scriptures that had been lost to time. The martial arts civilization had peaked in those 10,000 years, but tragically, humanity was no more to carry on the tradition. Lucian became the sole inheritor of this ancient legacy. The story unfolds in a world ravaged by a catastrophe. Once the beautiful planet lay in ruins and a gaping hole within the heavens, from which a legion of monsters and creatures poured forth. The traces of humanity had long since vanished, leaving behind nothing but a barren wasteland. Amidst the desolation, however, there stood a lone figure, a man of immense power and unshakable conviction. He stood before the colossal creature with a calm demeanor, his hand held firmly behind his back with otherworldly energy coursing through his veins. The man's eyes blazed in bright light, and with a swift, fluid motion, he unleashed a devastating blast, completely annihilating anything in his way. Lucian jolted awake in the middle of class, his eyes bleary and unfocused. The taunting laughter of his classmates echoed in his ears, even the teacher sneered at him with contempt. The teacher pointed an accusatory finger at Lucian, his voice dripping with disdain, claiming that no one will ever hire Lucian as a bricklayer, since the basic requirement of blood energy level is 0.8 for a bricklayer. As the class finally ended, Lucian's friend Ming approached him with concern for his well-being. He offered to take Lucian to the internet cafe and treat him to some snacks and games, hoping to lift his spirits. But Lucian was too drained from the constant nightmare that had been bothering him for quite some time. Unbeknownst to Lucian, fate had conspired to transport him into this isekai. He had been a diligent student, focused on acing his university entrance exam, but now he had to face an entirely different test of survival. Lucian couldn't help but notice the similarities between his old world and this new one. The only difference was the incredible level of martial arts that existed in this world. As Lucian gazed upon the giant screen broadcasting the recent victory of the 8th Legion, successfully defending another wave of monsters, just then, his reverie was shattered by the sight of a delivery woman carrying an enormous stack of packages with effortless ease. Lucian couldn't believe his eyes and envied her power. The sun was slowly sinking into the horizon, casting a warm glow over the city as Lucian trudged his way back to his old apartment. His eyes fell upon his mother in the living room, tenderly applying medicinal patches to his father's back. Despite the physical pain, his parents' faces lit up at the sight of their son. His father quickly got dressed, but the bandages and patches on his body betrayed the immense effort he had put in to provide for his family. With a gentle smile, Lucian suggested that his father invests in an acupuncture machine to alleviate his pain and promote better circulation. But his father, ever the stoic and strong-willed, simply flexed his bicep and joked that he was made of steel and could withstand any pain. Suddenly, his father took out 2 small containers, which he presented to Lucian. It was a new supplement that cost a staggering $20,000, a fortune for a family like theirs. Overwhelmed by his father's selfless gesture, Lucian struggled to hold back his tears and bit his lips. As Lucian's parents questioned whether his blood energy levels had reached the desired 0.85 mark, he felt a knot of anxiety form in his stomach. He sprinted to his room without wasting a moment, knowing that every second counted. With determination etched on his face, Lucian immediately began the body strengthening technique. The technique was a fusion of ancient yoga, martial arts, and judo, expertly adapted to create a powerful and effective method for beginners to build a solid foundation. Lucian took a deep breath before launching into an explanation of the cataclysmic event that had changed the world. 3 centuries ago, the world had been plunged into chaos as monstrous creatures erupted from the sky and the ground, rendering modern weapons useless. In the face of this unprecedented threat, humanity had undergone a genetic mutation, unleashing unimaginable power and ushering in a new age of martial arts. But even with these newfound abilities, the human race had found themselves at a massive disadvantage against the monsters that threatened their very existence. Cities fell on a daily basis, and the human race was forced to retreat and regroup. After 3 consecutive rounds of the grueling body strengthening technique, Lucian's energy had been completely sapped. Despite his best efforts, his blood energy level had remained unchanged. Sweat poured down his face as he struggled to catch his breath, his determination unwavering even in the face of such adversity. He knew that his parents had sacrificed so much for him, and he refused to let them down now. Grimacing with effort, he slowly rose to his feet, but as he stood there, wavering on unsteady legs, he suddenly felt a wave of dizziness sweep over him. The world spun around him, followed by his collapsing onto the ground. Lucian woke up, but what he saw around him was not the familiar surroundings of his bedroom. Instead, he found himself in a desolate wasteland of his familiar nightmare. Lucian tried to wake himself up from this nightmare, but to no avail. And then, a zombie leaped toward Lucian, its gruesome mouth inches away from his face. In the past few nights, Lucian had run from this monster in terror, but this time, something inside him snapped. With a primal roar, he unleashed all the energy he could muster into his legs and kicked the zombie away. Not content to stop there, Lucian grabbed a nearby rock and began beating the undead creature mercilessly, striking it again and again until its body finally gave way, leaving behind a strange black liquid that oozed toward him. As he watched the viscous liquid approach, a torrent of unfamiliar memories flooded Lucian's mind, vivid and disorienting. He saw an unknown man speaking to a friend on the beach about his desire to join the elite defensive squad. The man soon donned a military uniform and became a member of the prestigious base number 1359, where he underwent rigorous training. Then, a chaotic memory of the base being breached by monstrous creatures. In this sudden onslaught of memories, Lucian felt his heart racing, struggling to come to grips with the deluge of information. Lucian stood in disbelief, wondering how he had managed to retain the memories of the men he had just defeated in their zombie form. His hand trembled uncontrollably, unaware of the powerful aura surrounding him. Just as he was lost in thought, a sudden attack came from behind. Without missing a beat, Lucian spun around and with a single fluid motion, snapped the head off the zombie with graceful movement, sending its body collapsing to the ground in a heap. As the lifeless corpse began to dissolve into a dark, viscous fluid, Lucian felt a strange sense of energy pulsing through his veins. With a sudden rush of power coursing through his body, Lucian realized that he not only had the ability to retain the memories of those he defeated, but he could also absorb their power. Lucian couldn't believe what he was experiencing. He remembered that he was in the realm of his dreams. He took a deep breath and wondered only if everything was real. Despite the surreal nature of his dream, Lucian couldn't shake the feeling that there was something important he needed to discover. The memory of the military base number 1359 lingered in his mind once again, teasing him with the possibility of unlocking the secrets of this strange world. Suddenly, the dream became disoriented. He was pulled back into the real world, where his sister was calling him to dinner. Lu Qinghe, the only younger sister of Lucian, took a closer look at Lucian, currently glistening with sweat. The chiseled body underneath the shirt made her blush. She quickly turned around and walked away. Lucian recollected the days of his youth when he and his sister were inseparable, but the dynamics between them shifted dramatically after the first evaluation test, which showed the result to be an astonishing blood energy level of 1 and power level of 100. It was not unexpected, given that his sister was a prodigy, destined for a brilliant future. Lucian took a deep breath, then he gazed upon his reflection in the mirror and beheld his exquisitely sculpted physique, feeling not a shred of exhaustion, and all the memories and power he gained from the dream were carried over, causing him to ponder if he could truly manifest the power of his subconscious dreams into the real world. Shrugging off his ruminations, Lucian walked over to the dinner table. At the table, he devoured the food, one bowl of rice after another, as if his gut were akin to a black hole. With nothing left on the table, he nervously withdrew his arms, but his father snatched his bowl and implored his mother to cook more rice and prepare additional dishes. The father seemed elated by his son's great appetite, and even his sister beamed a graceful smile. Following dinner, Lucian strode towards a nearby martial arts academy, where the instructor was a level 4 martial artist and a well-known figure in the city. The hierarchical structure of martial arts is as follows. A level 1 martial artist is deemed standard if their blood energy level is 1.5, and battle strength stands at 150. A level 2 martial artist surpasses this with a blood energy level of 15 and a battle strength of 1,500. A level 3 martial artist ups the ante with a blood energy level of 100 and a battle strength of 10,000, while a level 4 martial artist must exceed a blood energy level of 200 and a battle strength of 100,000. As Lucian approached the reception desk, he inquired about undergoing a test to assess his blood energy level and battle strength. Despite her awareness that he may not hail from a wealthy background, the receptionist maintained her professionalism. In the training room, Lucian rested his hand on a gleaming crystal ball to gauge his blood energy level. To his astonishment, it had skyrocketed to 0.963, a significant improvement from his previous score of 0.7. Sensing an opportunity to prove himself, he turned his attention to another device, curious about his battle strength. He took a deep breath and assumed the combat form he had memorized from the recollections of 2 fallen soldiers. With fluid movements, he struck out, and his battle strength registered an impressive 113. The magnitude of his improvement within a mere hour left Lucian incredulous. He pondered what heights he could achieve if he spent a full 10 hours honing his abilities within the dream realm. As he lay in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling and counting a menagerie of more than 10,000 sheep, he found himself unable to fall asleep. Frustrated and restless, he rose and flipped on the light switch, resolving to undertake some additional exercises. He assumed his stance, preparing to perform the body strengthening technique. But something felt odd. He executed unfamiliar movements, doing these movements subconsciously as if channeling the memory of the fallen soldier. As Lucian continued to implement the new movements, he discovered that there were over 200 additional maneuvers. Every time he practiced, he felt a distinct surge of energy coursing through him. It was not only the body strengthening technique that benefited from this new knowledge, his breathing technique also experienced a noticeable enhancement. A single session felt like it had granted him years of training results, leaving him astounded at his newfound prowess. As Lucian completed the entire technique, he experienced a sensation akin to his soul being wrenched from his body. He felt extreme hunger, and his body's water content seemed to have evaporated. It was clear to him that regular food would not suffice. He required high-quality supplements to maintain his newfound strength. However, the cost of these supplements was astronomical, and he recognized that he would need to find a means of earning money to fund his ongoing growth. The next day, Lucian found himself in the school gym, ready for the combat lesson. The teacher, Mr. Zhong, was a level 2 martial artist who had faced a monster head-on and bore the scars to prove it. However, Lucian couldn't help but feel that the movements and techniques Mr. Zhong was presenting were too simplistic and lacked power compared to what he had learned in his dreams. As Mr. Zhong finished his demonstration, he called upon one of the most popular students in the school, Yang, to spar with him. Yang was not only handsome but also the top student in his class, and his family was incredibly wealthy. Yang had become quite the supplement connoisseur, and his blood energy level had soared to an impressive 1.2. After sparring, Mr. Zhong praised Yang's movements, promising additional feedback after class. But despite the teacher's compliments, Yang couldn't help but sneer at the words in his mind. Mr. Zhong then asked if anyone was brave enough to spar with Yang, but all the students avoided eye contact, leaving him disappointed. However, just as Mr. Zhong's disappointment began to show, his gaze met Lucian's piercing stare. In Lucian's eyes, Yang could see a formidable aura, one that he had only ever witnessed in those who had tasted the bitter reality of death. Ming desperately tried to persuade Lucian to forfeit, fearing that his friend would suffer serious injuries. However, Lucian merely smiled and reassured Ming that he had nothing to worry about. As he stood in the gym, Yang arrogantly raised his hand and sneered at Lucian, warning him to steer clear of his hand lest it shatters. Undeterred, Lucian graciously thanked Yang for his advice and declared that he was ready to fight. Suddenly, Yang lunged at him with the intent of ending the match with a single punch. But much to his astonishment, Lucian effortlessly evaded the attack and landed a precise blow to Yang's face, sending him hurtling to the opposite end of the room. As Mr. Zhong frantically rushed over to check on Yang's well-being, the other students looked on in shock and awe. It was inconceivable that Yang had been defeated with a single punch. Yang has quickly whisked away from the gym on a stretcher, leaving behind a stunned and bewildered crowd. Lucian, meanwhile, felt a sense of remorse for his actions and apologized to Mr. Zhong for what had transpired. To his surprise, Mr. Zhong remained silent for a few moments before placing a reassuring hand on Lucian's shoulder. After a brief exchange, Mr. Zhong invited Lucian to his office. The office was simple, with only the potted plant and a battle strength testing machine. With a stern expression on his face, Mr. Zhong demanded to know if Lucian had been using any illegal steroids or performance-enhancing drugs, which were strictly prohibited by the school due to their damaging effects on the body, demanding Lucian to prove it. In response, Lucian calmly rested his hand on the crystal ball. A sudden jolt of electricity filled the room, and the machine displayed a blood energy level of 1.532, effectively classifying Lucian as a level 1 martial artist. Mr. Zhong was taken aback by this revelation. The mere term prodigy seemed insufficient to capture the immense talent possessed by Lucian, who at the age of just 18 had already achieved the rank of a formal level 1 martial artist. Mr. Zhong struggled to gather his thoughts when he was suddenly jolted out of his reverie by a loud noise. The next thing he knew, the battle strength testing machine was in pieces, as was the potted plant. Despite being saddened by the loss of his beloved plant, Mr. Zhong couldn't help but be awestruck by Lucian's incredible strength. After a moment of stunned silence, Mr. Zhong learned that just 2 weeks prior, Lucian had only possessed a blood energy level of 0.8. He leaped to his feet in disbelief, amazed that Lucian had managed to achieve such incredible feats in just a fortnight. Mr. Zhong eagerly asked if Lucian was from a renowned family or if he had been taught by a grandmaster. To his surprise, Lucian revealed that he was neither born into nobility nor had he received any formal training. Mr. Zhong reflected on his own past experiences, reminiscing about how he had become a level 2 martial artist before joining the army. He remembered the lessons he had learned on the battlefield, where he had come to the realization that people like him could never hope to triumph over the monsters. The sheer strength and power of those beasts were beyond human comprehension, and the only individuals capable of standing against them were those with even greater strength, individuals like Lucian. Taking a deep breath, Mr. Zhong suggested that based on Lucian's remarkable abilities, he should be placed in the elite class and given access to the very best educational resources available. However, Lucian politely declined the offer, as he knew that no amount of education could compare to the opportunities he could create in his dreams. As Mr. Zhong continued to implore Lucian, he spoke with an air of conviction that bordered on the theatrical. He assured Lucian that the school would always have his back, but Lucian, wary of empty promises, made 2 firm requests: a scholarship application and the freedom to attend class on his own terms. Mr. Zhong seemed to understand Lucian's struggle, but he quickly regained his composure and nodded sagely. He knew that obtaining a scholarship would take some time, so he took matters into his own hands. With a flourish, Mr. Zhong produced his bank card and handed it to Lucian, telling him to pay him back whenever he could. Lucian was taken aback by this unexpected display of generosity. As Lucian walked out of Mr. Zhong's office, his heart was racing with anticipation. The prospect of encountering another prodigy was enough to send shivers down his spine. To think that there was someone else out there with level 2 martial arts battle strength at the tender age of 18 was simply mind-boggling. He saw the young man as a secret weapon, a powerful asset that could stun the other schools on exam day. But it wasn't just about winning a competition. Mr. Zhong had grander aspirations for Lucian. He spoke of that place, a hallowed ground that had remained elusive for so many years. As Lucian stood before the imposing gates of the Wrenchin pharmacy, he couldn't help but feel a pang of envy as he watched a mother purchase expensive supplements for her daughter. He knew all too well the harsh reality of the martial arts world, that wealth and privilege often paved the way for success. He was all too aware of the obstacles in his path. His thoughts turned to his younger sister, who was still trapped in the same cycle of poverty and hardship dragged down by him. In that moment, Lucian felt like a fish trapped in a small tank, yearning for the vast ocean beyond. But he couldn't help but cling to the comfort and familiarity of his water tank. With a newfound sense of purpose, Lucian felt as though he had broken through the confines of his old life and stepped into a brave new world. The opportunities that lay ahead of him were boundless, and he was determined to seize them with both hands. It was as if he had broken through a bottleneck that had been holding him back. His memories, techniques, and combat experience now seemed clearer than ever before, and he was able to absorb them as his own. As he walked through the bustling streets of the city, Lucian couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and determination. With a sense of purpose burning in his heart, Lucian purchased an acupuncture machine for his father, supplements for his sister, and groceries for his mother. In Lucian's dream realm, he moved with the grace of a seasoned warrior, effortlessly taking down another zombie with a single swift strike. The memories that flooded his mind led him ever closer to his destination, base 1359. As he battled wave after wave of the undead. Finally, he arrived at the base itself and was awestruck by the massive walls that surrounded it. The walls were at least 20 meters thick, and Lucian couldn't help but wonder what kind of attack could possibly breach such fortifications. If this world, with its advanced martial arts and evolved civilization, was still so vulnerable in the face of the monsters, what hope was there for his own world? As he explored the city within the walls, Lucian's eyes were drawn to a towering building that seemed to be the command center. Within its walls, he caught a glimpse of a man dressed all in white, his face expressionless, and with only one arm. Out of nowhere, Lucian felt an immense surge of killing intent. It was as if the very air itself had thickened with the weight of this impending danger. The lethal energy emanating from the commanding center shook him on the ground. As Lucian stood there, still reeling from the shock of the man's killing intent, he knew in his gut that he shouldn't linger in that place. He retreated slowly, eyes darting around for any sign of danger, and eventually stumbled upon a room unlike any other he had seen in the base. As he approached the machine in the center of the room, his hand rested on the machine, and suddenly it sprang to life, emitting a soft hum. A moment later, a holographic image flickered into existence before him, the image of a female AI. Lucian was stunned when he heard the woman speak his language. The AI introduced herself as a product from the Tianheng Tech 16th generation support artificial intelligence. Her name is I, who is responsible for the network in base 1359. Lucian requested to see the most recent news. He couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay hidden within this mysterious base. As soon as Lucian made his request, I sprang into action. With the speed and efficiency that only an artificial intelligence could muster, she conjured up a series of tabs that displayed the latest and greatest news from around the galaxy. I was a 16th generation support AI from Tianheng Tech, and her programming was second to none. The first tab that popped up was a doozy. In June of the martial year 11024, base 1359 had successfully launched its 58th exploration spaceship in search of a suitable planet. But the news wasn't all good. The second tab that appeared informed Lucian that in July, base 105 had fallen. It was a stark reminder that even with all their technology and martial prowess, humanity was still vulnerable to the dangers of the monsters. And speaking of martial prowess, the third tab that I summoned up was a real shocker. Apparently, General Sun Kang had just become the 472nd level 10 martial artist. Lucian was amazed. He had no idea that there were so many level 10 martial artists out there. And yet, even with all that power, humanity was still unable to protect its own planet, forcing them to abandon it. Lucian's heart sank as he absorbed the devastating news. The human civilization had been completely wiped out. No reports or signals were coming from the exploration spaceship, indicating that there was no hope for their survival. It was a stark reminder of the harsh realities of the universe, where even the mightiest civilizations could be reduced to nothing in the blink of an eye. With a heavy heart, Lucian turned to I for some solace. He asked her to provide him with the history of this planet, hoping to learn something from their demise. As the data streams began to flow, as he delved deeper into the planet's past, Lucian's shock only grew. The timeline of events that I was rendering for him was eerily similar to the history of his own world. Monsters erupting from all over the world, the emergence of the first martial artist within her power in the 34th martial art year, and the establishment of the Martial Art Association, all of these were events that had happened in Lucian's own world as well. Astonished and disoriented, Lucian came to the realization that the events he had just witnessed were not a glimpse of an alternate world, but a shocking revelation about the fate of his own world, thousands of years in the future. A chill ran down his spine as he contemplated the implications of this knowledge. But even in the face of such bleak prospects, Lucian refused to lose hope. Perhaps this was just a coincidence or a parallel universe, with a renewed sense of purpose. Lucian turned his attention to gathering more information. He asked I to search for personal details about himself and his family, but his hopes were soon dashed when he discovered that he had passed away at a young age, just 28 years old, in the martial year 325. His curiosity was piqued, and he then attempted to search for information about his younger sister. But he was thwarted by the system, which demanded that he prove his gene blood before he could register for access. Puzzled and frustrated, Lucian wondered how he could provide the necessary blood sample. At that moment, I came to the rescue, biting onto Lucian's finger and collecting the required blood sample. Lucian couldn't help but be amazed at the sheer wildness of the future, where even artificial intelligence had become capable of such unorthodox behavior. As I's expression changed and red windows started popping up, Lucian couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. But before he could even ask, his personal information was suddenly refreshed, revealing that he had been a level 4 martial artist, a top graduate of the White River Academy, and a proud alumnus of the White River Martial University. After graduation, he joined the army and valiantly fought in battle, until his untimely death at the age of 37 in the martial year of 334. Lucian was dumbfounded. He had always believed that he was a prodigy, destined for greatness and fame. But now he realized that he was just one among many. A small cog in the vast machinery of history didn't even cause a small rabble. Lucian looked at the details with a discerning eye, and to his dismay, he discovered some flaws. The record showed that he had achieved a commendable score in the exam, although a decent score if just solely relying on basic training. He was certain that if he incorporated the ability of his dream realm, his scores would skyrocket to unprecedented heights. Lucian, being an unparalleled warrior, was not content with mediocrity. He knew that he was destined for greatness and that his future was not confined to this mundane reality. Lucian had an unyielding conviction within him to become the strongest person and be the person who alters history. He aspires to be more than a mere spark, but rather the catalyst that sets the world ablaze. The following day, Lucian explained to his mom that he can now learn from home, no longer have to go to class. Both his sister and his mom were skeptical. After finishing his breakfast, he went back to his room to train. Lu Qinghe stared at her brother. She felt that he had changed a lot, although she doesn't know how to explain it. But her brother surely felt more mysterious now. After seeing what he had seen in his dream realm, he knew there were no time to waste, and he must climb to the top as fast as he can, and in search of a way to change the future. Back in the dream realm, Lucian requested I to all notes, books, and training methods related to martial arts. Lucian had to narrow it down to the ones just suitable for his own level. After filtering, there were 3 top selected choices, all written by level 11 martial artists. 1 is the basic stellar body enhancing technique, the second was a natural breathing technique, lastly was the crystal meditation technique, all part of the Spark program. It was as if a veil had been lifted from Lucian's eyes, revealing the secrets of the martial arts world. These top-tier martial artists had foreseen the impending doom of the world and had preserved the essence of their lifelong crafts, hoping that someone would continue their legacy. Lucian wasted no time and immediately delved into the 3 selected techniques. The stellar body enhancing technique was a profound method that set the human body into a micro-universe, strengthening every part of the body and imbuing every cell with the power of a star. The natural breathing technique allowed its practitioners to absorb the power of different elements, enhancing their physical capabilities. Lastly, the crystal meditation method was used to bolster mental fortitude and make one more resilient to stress and adversity, thereby allowing them to train more effectively. But after waking up from his dream realm, he noticed that the techniques had purified his body, flushing out all toxins. Lucian is also preparing to use the formula to craft his own supplements. The next day, Lucian arrived at the White River Academy. Mr. Zhong greeted him warmly but reminded him to attend at least 1 class per week. He made his way to the pharmacy, determined to rent a room for his supplement crafting. Despite several rejections, Lucian persisted. Mr. Zhong saw the fire in his eyes and personally funded him an additional 50,000, giving him the means to purchase everything he needed. Lucian knew that he needed to pay the favor back one day. Just when Lucian was about to give up on finding a room, fate intervened. He stumbled upon a quiet pharmacy. The cashier was deeply indulged in live stream and told Lucian just grab whatever he needs. Lucian managed to catch the cashier's attention, and after some clever bribery, he was granted use of a room for 3 hours. Donning his lab coat, Lucian began his work. He mixed and measured, using techniques from shows like Rick and Morty and Full Metal Alchemist to create his ultimate supplement. Lucian held his final product in his hands. It was a supplement unlike any other, containing rare and powerful knowledge from 10,000 years in the future. Lucian boldly gingerly brought the supplement to his lips, eagerly awaiting the promised effects. However, as he gulped down the liquid, he was dismayed to feel nothing at all. Was this yet another worthless elixir? But then, a sudden jolt coursed through his chest, sending him reeling to the ground in agonizing pain. His body convulsed as he cried out in torment, the veins in his neck bulging with the strain. For several endless minutes, Lucian writhed on the floor, unable to do anything but endure the excruciating sensations tearing through him. But then, as abruptly as it had started, the torment subsided, leaving him gasping and drenched in sweat. Despite the searing agony he had just experienced, Lucian was astounded by the effectiveness of the supplement. Not only had it bolstered his blood energy levels, but it had also worked wonders on his complexion, leaving his skin glowing with a newfound radiance. However, Lucian was suddenly interrupted by the urgent knocking of the cashier at the door. With no time to spare, the young man gestured frantically to Lucian to flee through the back exit, warning him that the owner had returned. As the owner strode into the lab, her expression was a seething mask of frustration and disappointment. She had always known that the supplement industry was cutthroat and unforgiving, but now more than ever she was acutely aware of the need to stay on the cutting edge. She thought bitterly of her family, whose stubborn adherence to outdated ideologies had ultimately led to their downfall. It was only by embracing change and innovation that one could hope to succeed in this ruthless market. The cashier, nervously fidgeting in a corner, offered a timid greeting as the owner swept past him. Her heart sank as she noticed the stains on her lab coat, and she rounded on the hapless young man with a withering glare. "Have you let someone into my lab?" she demanded, her voice cold and sharp as a blade. The cashier stammered and stuttered, unable to offer a coherent response. With a snarl of frustration, the owner fired him on the spot as she began to tidy up the lab. Her eyes fell on the scattered remnants of Lucian's supplements. With a sudden surge of curiosity, she scooped up the tiny droplets. To her astonishment, she discovered that even a single drop of the supplement was astonishingly powerful. The owner then dashed out of the shop in hot pursuit of the cashier. As the cashier turned towards the sound of the approaching footsteps, his heart leaped with excitement at the sight of the owner sprinting towards him. Her lithe figure and flowing hair seemed to cast a spell over him, and he imagined that perhaps this was finally his chance for his own harem. But before he could even utter a word, the owner had grabbed him by the collar, her expression fierce and commanding as she demanded to know who had used her lab. The cashier could feel the force of her grip rocking him back and forth. The owner promised to double his salary if he could get in touch with the person who used her lab, and he trembled and handed his phone over. The owner could feel her pulse racing with excitement and anticipation. As she knew the supplement was at least 10 times more effective than the ones currently in the market for $100,000, what makes it nothing short of a world-class evolution is that the ingredients are so basic and affordable that its net cost wouldn't even surpass $5,000. Back to Lucian, who had just completed his grueling training session, his phone suddenly buzzed with an unexpected call from the cashier. However, to his surprise, the voice on the other side was a female voice, who identified herself as the owner of the pharmacy. Her name is Susu. Without hesitation, Susu eagerly requested a meeting with Lucian, expressing her sincere interest in promoting his revolutionary new supplements. After confirming the meeting for next week, Susu could hardly contain her excitement at the prospect of meeting the masterful pharmacist. Her enthusiasm was quickly dampened when the cashier divulged a startling revelation. The man who had been using her lab was merely a high school student. After a brief shock, she is now even more curious about Lucian's real identity. As Lucian delved deeper into the dream realm, he could feel his power growing with each passing day. Today, his target was a level 4 martial artist zombie, a formidable opponent. Without a moment's hesitation, Lucian charged toward the zombie, but as he closed in for the kill, he was caught off guard by a swift counterattack that left his arm numb and throbbing with pain. The zombie roared with fury, its bloodlust driving it forward as it lunged toward Lucian once again. This time, Lucian was ready. He didn't try to take the zombie head-on, instead choosing to duck and dodge. Moving swiftly to the side, Lucian unleashed a devastating roundhouse kick that sent the zombie crashing to the ground. Lucian leaped into the air and brought down a crushing axe kick that left the zombie motionless on the ground. As Lucian delved deeper into the memories of these fallen warriors, he began to shed his initial perception of them as mere monsters, instead viewing them as fallen soldiers who once valiantly protected their land. With a deep sense of reverence, he humbly bowed to show his respect before turning to leave. Having dedicated himself to mastering the 3 techniques, Lucian spent a week honing his skills. The fruits of his labor had been nothing short of astonishing. His power had grown exponentially. Eager to put his newfound skills to the test, Lucian made his way to a martial arts school where he requested the use of a testing dummy. And he now boasted a new blood energy level of 15.632, propelling him to the rank of a level 2 martial artist. Lucian turned his gaze towards the testing dummy, his eyes glinting with a fierce determination. With a simple punch, he shattered the previous record, clocking an impressive battle strength of 3,137, double that of an average level 2 martial artist. But Lucian was not content to rest on this number. He knew that this was merely a glimpse of his true potential. As he assumed his stance, but
You guys use this time to use the toilet, okay?
but this time he was serious. As he stepped away from the testing site, Lucian was greeted by the radiant smile of the receptionist lady. As Lucian left the school, he strolled past a pair of young martial arts enthusiasts. The young girl, who happened to be the owner's daughter, was engaged in a light-hearted exchange with the receptionist lady. The receptionist lady was clearly taken aback by Lucian's strikingly handsome appearance. However, the other male student, who was eavesdropping on their conversation, had a different view on the matter. He felt that looks were irrelevant and that only one's martial attainments mattered. In his eyes, Lucian, who appeared to be an average kid, was nothing more than a lost cause. The male student's arrogance was palpable, his superiority complexed by the fact that he had grown up using all kinds of supplements, making him stronger than his peers his age. However, before he could continue his tirade, the young girl smacked him on the head and gave him a piece of her mind. She sternly reminded him not to discriminate against others and to curb his arrogant behavior. Despite the young girl's admonishment, the male student was still adamant about proving his point. He demanded to see Lucian's testing results and begged the girl to show them to him. With a resigned sigh, the girl handed over the tablet. As they perused the results, their jaws dropped in disbelief. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Lucian's blood energy level was off the charts, far surpassing anything they had ever seen before. They couldn't help but wonder if the machine had malfunctioned somehow, but the receptionist lady reassured them that the machine had been checked and calibrated just the day before. Realizing that Lucian was no ordinary student, they were overcome with a sense of urgency to find him and learn more about him. As Lucian stepped out of the taxi, the driver seemed to really like Lucian and even offered to set him up a date with his daughter. With a polite smile, Lucian thanked the driver and made his way toward the White River City Martial Artists Association. As he approached the building, he witnessed a young martial artist rushing out, tears streaming down his face. It seemed that the results he had received from testing at home were slightly different from the ones he had received at the association. Undeterred, Lucian made his way to the front desk and inquired about the martial artist identification assessment. After filling out a form, he was directed to the testing site, which was packed with applicants of all ages, most of whom seemed to be around 25 years old. Among them was a young girl who looked even younger than Lucian. As Lucian waited in line, a towering figure emerged from the elevator and began cutting through the line, causing a commotion among the applicants. A female applicant called him out on his brazen behavior, but security brushed her off, claiming that he was there for the level 3 assessment and was thus qualified to bypass the line. The crowd was left astounded, as there were only a handful of level 3 martial artists in the city, and the towering figure before them boasted an impressive score. His blood energy level was an astounding 107, and his battle strength reached an absurd 10831. With a single strike, he sent shockwaves that caused many of the onlookers to lose their balance and fall to the ground. After his assessment, the towering figure turned around and noticed two individuals who seemed unfazed by the power of his strike. One of them was Lucian, who walked towards the assessment machine with a nonchalant demeanor that seemed to suggest he wasn't overly impressed by the display of power. The young girl standing nearby was convinced that Lucian was just an arrogant kid, but she was about to be proven wrong. With no one else in line for assessment, Lucian stepped up to the machine and placed his hand on the crystal. To everyone